From the Tapped Out Wrestling Network studios, we bring you the original Tapped Out Wrestling podcast with your hosts, Nick McDaniel and Myron Fancher. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another interview edition of the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Today's episode actually started out, it was Myron and I sat down with Bobby Mathews from ProWrestlingStories.com. And it was just going to be a simple interview, and we was having such a great time. It turned into a 2-hour conversation it actually kind of worked out pretty good. The first hour was really in depth about Bobby has written a great article over at ProWrestlingStories.com about tag team wrestling, specifically one specific tag team, the Midnight Express. So we spent about an hour talking about tag team wrestling. Kind of brought up, he had a top 15, 30 list, kind of broke down his top 10 more in detail. And for giggles, I pulled up my old top 10 list we did from the archives back in the day when we did our top 10 tag teams of all times. Kind of compared some notes a little bit along the way. But what we're going to do for you is we're going to break that episode up into, that interview into two separate podcasts. The first one will basically be a really good companion piece to go with the article that Bobby wrote on ProWrestlingStories.com, which you definitely want to check out. It'll be with the link and everything here. We'll also have the link to the article as well. But more importantly, the second part of this interview will drop later on this week, this weekend, probably on Saturday to be exact. And then it'll cover other just current topics and things like that. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and drop part one. So here's Myron and I talking with writer Bobby Mathews from ProWrestlingStories.com.
Okay, guys, this is Myron from the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast, sitting here with Nick, and we've got Bob back in to talk wrestling, and today's topic sounds like it's going to be tag teams. Hey, Bob, what's going on, man?
Hey, not too much. How are you guys?
Doing good. Getting ourselves together for another day of podcast recording and studio meetings and getting ready to do stuff. And apparently I'm going to sit down the rest of the evening once I get done with this, hopefully, and
nice.
Nobody in the family will make me cut grass. How about you?
Nice. Well, I will be traveling for Mother's Day weekend.
Oh, so cool. You going to see the family?
Going to see the family, going to South Alabama, going to L.A. as we call it, but not the fun one. This one's Lower Alabama.
Yes. I growing up in Alabama myself, and South Alabama, I think, still is better than South Georgia, in my opinion. I hate to bash our friends in South Georgia, but something about good old Lower Alabama.
I mean, I've been to Thomaston and Albany, and actually used to live in Statesboro. So I was the sports editor for the Statesboro Herald for a little while.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So, but there are things I like, but we were covering Georgia Southern. We were covering that year Statesboro High School won state championship in football, which was just a blast to cover,
Oh, yeah. High school football is huge.
Oh, yeah. Always fun to cover a winning team rather than, one that's not very good.
Well, if you're not familiar where we live up in Buford. Mm-hmm. There's a team up here that's racked up a few state championships here. Like I think they won 7 of 8 in multiple divisions. Their coach is no longer with them because, get this, he lost the state championship 2 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They were in the championship. They lost it 2 years in a row, and he's gone.
This reminds me of, Frank Solich at Nebraska, or what's his name, Greg Seawalk down at Georgia Southern, who guys who were taking teams to 8-3 and 9-3, or 8-4, 9-3, winning programs just weren't championship programs that people were used to.
Yeah.
And no matter how successful you are, you're out the door if you can't sustain that.
If you can't live up to Irk Russell, right? You're not going to.
Absolutely.
There was a long line of people between Bear Bryant and Nick Saban. Sometimes people tend to
Absolutely. Absolutely. Although, Nick, I got to tell you, nobody outside the state of Georgia is going to get the Irk Russell reference, but I appreciate it.
I figured you might, covering down there, you would know who that was.
Oh, man. So we were going to talk about tag teams.
Yes, sir.
I sat down.
This. You've done
So
a lot on tag teams lately.
I have. I did a story on ProWrestlingStories.com. Cheap
Once
plug.
again, great
On
website.
Thank you. The Midnight Express, basically number one with a bullet in my tag team list. I think they're the best tag team of all time.
I would probably have to agree with you, and I'm going to look at it not from as much a ring side standpoint. To me, the Midnight Express is heel wrestling for a decade plus, and it is the essence of it.
Absolutely.
It's roster changes. It's promotion change. It's fake, real Midnight Express, new Midnight Express. It's controversy. It's heels. It's traditional match. That's what I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We won't talk about Bombastic Bob and whoever else. It was Bart Gunn, I think, and I can't remember what they called him.
Audacious.
That was it. I think I had stricken that word from my memory. Thanks a lot, Nick. But I sat down to kind of do a little research into my top 10 tag teams. And I've got 30. I narrowed it down to 30.
Oh, wow.
Because you get into it and you look at all of these guys who had these great teams, and I'm gonna make it real simple. I'll do a list of honorable mentions here. Okay. Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, currently. I think they're phenomenal. I think they're a great team.
I think they're horribly underused right now.
I completely agree with you. Let those guys. This is one of the things where the product doesn't work, at least for me as a long-term fan. The product doesn't work a lot of times now because you will not let anybody be a true heel. Yeah. You won't let somebody go out and use the ropes for leverage. You won't let somebody go out and take a pair of brass knucks in their trunks, or a chain or something like that. You don't have somebody out there who's getting heel heat. They can work in the ring great, but they can't piss people off like they used to.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's that want to get the fans come across and attack the wrestlers type thing.
Absolutely. So and I know that a lot of that has been lost with the loss of kayfabe. I understand that, but there is still that moment, and I love Dustin Runnels talks about this, where he picks out a guy in the audience that even though the guy knows that it's all work, that it's all quote unquote fake, he wants that guy who looks like he's not believing anything. He wants to make him believe, at least for his match.
Yes.
So, I want to give some quick shout outs here to my honorable mentions. So Anderson and Gallows, then the PYTs, Norvell Austin and Coco Beware.
That's a good one.
So little known and a lot of fun. The original Outlaws. You guys remember who I'm talking about here? Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch.
Yep. Oh, yes. Now, I have seen them. It's been a while, though.
So, very early on in Dusty's career, and he's still, Dusty. He doesn't have the body, but he's quick. He's bumping all over the place. He's moving. He's got his working shoes on every night. Murdoch's more the badass of the two, and Dusty's just in there selling his ass off and working hard.
That was Texas, right?
AWA.
Yeah. AWA Texas. They did. I believe they even did like Mid-South Louisiana, Oklahoma area too. So.
Okay.
You got to mention the Von Erichs.
Yes.
You know, and then one of my favorite teams in any of its incarnations, the Andersons, where you have Gene and Ole, and then Ole and Arn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of good bloodline right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Line.
Yeah, it's not a real bloodline, but you had to fit a certain mold and a certain toughness to be one of the Andersons.
Oh God, yeah.
My favorite story about the Andersons is how they nearly made Magnum TA quit when he tried out to be a wrestler. So, are you guys familiar with this story at all?
No, I've never heard the story.
Okay, so Magnum TA, Terry Allen, wanted to be a wrestler. He was from Virginia. He had been a state champion, I believe, wrestler in high school, and wanted to wrestle in his home territory. He wanted to become pro. And well, at the time, Mid-Atlantic, which is Jim Crockett Promotions, to be a wrestler, you would go through a camp, a tryout with the Andersons, specifically with Gene. Mm-hmm. So you go through and you would get like an hour-long battle of calisthenics first. You would work your ass off, sweat, get really exhausted, and then Gene would take you in the ring and stretch you until you screamed and cried. And basically Gene would just beat the piss out of you.
Just to see how bad you're a wrestler.
Yeah. How bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? How much self-respect do you have to maybe not quit, not give up? And so Magnum he got his ass kicked, basically. No matter how big and strong you are, no matter how tough you are, you do an hour-long or 2-hour-long workout, however long it is, then get in the ring with a guy who can wrestle.
Yeah.
Who can make you carry his weight, who can just wear you out and then hurt you. Mm-hmm. That is going to, you just can't do it. It'd be like asking an NFL football player to play the Super Bowl immediately after running a marathon.
Yeah.
I mean,
they do that to a lot of the NFL guys that wanted to be wrestlers, is they would do a similar program.
Oh, absolutely. It was hard to break into the business, especially at the time. Mm-hmm. And if I had the story correct, PA was leaving after getting his ass stretched, and he ran into, I think, Dusty Rhodes or Blackjack Mulligan, somebody like that, and basically said, I wanted to do this, but I don't know, I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if I should continue to try to do this. And the guy was like, if you want to be in this business, you come back next week. You come back again and again and again until they can't deny you, until they see that you're serious. Uh-huh. Which is what Magnum TA did. And he went on to have a stellar career until it was cut short by a car accident.
Yeah, he would have had a great long-term career, I think, if it hadn't been for that accident.
Oh, I absolutely think so. And I think that you could have seen him as a heel later on in his career, and he would have been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Agreed on that.
So
that's your honorable out of 30?
Those are my honorable mentions.
Okay.
So Fred Blassie and Don Carson, little-known team from the West Coast.
That's
all right.
Old-time tag team.
Old. This is part of my shtick. I go into deep dives on territory wrestling and look at this is the gimmick, yeah. So, Blassie and Carson. Blassie did not like Don Carson. He got put into a tag team with Carson by the LaBelles, who wanted another blonde main eventer for when Blassie would leave the territory and he would go off and do, shots on the East Coast or whatever. They wanted another guy. So here's the thing. Blassie, in his book, which if you've never seen or if you've never read Fred Blassie's book, it's fantastic. But he says, he thought of Carson basically as a cheap imitation, and he was not nearly as good as what the promoters wanted him to be. And Blassie did not last out in California. I'm sorry, pardon me. Carson did not last out in California. Mm-hmm. He went back to the southern states where a lot of it was you didn't have to necessarily always be great in the ring as long as you could do something outside the ring to get people interested. Yes. So Carson left, and he did his own thing and actually had a fairly good tag team with Dennis Condrey called the Big C's. They were masked wrestlers in Gulf Coast. Mm-hmm. And the reason they were a good tag team was because Condrey was bumping his ass off and working hard. Yes. This was Condrey after the Phil Vickers. I'm sorry?
It's hard to find somebody who'll say something bad about Condrey in the ring.
Oh, absolutely. Jim Cornette talks about Dennis Condrey, that nobody was doing the kind of work that Dennis was doing, where every movement was economical. Every movement meant something. It was always there. He was right there for every spot. He was crisp. He was tight with his moves. He took care of people. Dennis Condrey's never going to get the appreciation he deserves. Mm-hmm. So let me move on real quick because we got a lot of guys to talk about here. The Guerreros, also a California tag team, Hector and Mando.
Yes. Yep.
Back in the day. And then some people that, you guys probably actually heard of, like Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik, which were a great heel tag team. Tremendous heat off the charts at that point. Mm-hmm. When they were in the early 1980s, especially. The Dream Team, do you guys remember those guys who were hot for a minute?
Dream Team.
The Dream Team of Greg Valentine and Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Oh, I didn't remember that name. I did remember they were a tag team.
That was what they were supposedly called at the time, was the Dream Team. Uh-huh. A really great case of an older veteran wrestler helping lead a younger guy who, even though he had been in the business for a few years, Ed Leslie, who was Brutus the Barber Beefcake, was not that good. I mean, he had good physical presence, but Valentine was the guy who was leading that team and doing it really well. And Brutus got some good experience under his belt, and then went on to a singles run and a parasailing accident.
Yes. I remember Valentine when I was a kid in the WWE, mm-hmm. and he was just a cold, calculating, mm-hmm. badass heel. He was athletic looking. He was ugly as hell, but mm-hmm. he looked like, when you were a kid, just somebody who could tear you down and tear you apart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was.
Do you remember in Mid-Atlantic when they did the angle where he, quote unquote, broke Wahoo McDaniel's leg with a figure four leg lock?
I've heard that. I've heard of that angle.
Yes, that's my territory. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And he wore the shirt. I broke Wahoo's leg.
Yes, that was exactly where I was going with the I broke Wahoo's leg shirt. And he wouldn't just wear that to the cards. He would wear that out into public. I mean, and to be able to do that, you had to be a tough son of a bitch, because people would accost you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now I hate to swerve on you right here, Bob.
No, go ahead.
On my way over to Nick's this morning, I was listening to Cornette, his most recent show, and the concept was, are today's wrestlers their own worst enemies? And he's talking about what they do outside the ring when they're no longer in kayfabe, where they take pictures of each other together, in their personal lives, put them on Twitter, and then they go in the ring and act like they've got a massive, angle working, and they're bitter enemies. but they vacation together, or they go on sightseeing together. And Cornette's take on it was, don't shit on the business. It's my product outside the ring. Don't ruin what you're doing inside the ring.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about Valentine doing something like that and being willing to get in fights outside the ring for storyline, that level of dedication, I don't know, is it not there, or have the concepts changed completely?
I think it's a little bit of both. You have to look at, so when we talk kayfabe, we're not just talking about, what happens in the ring or what happens in the promos and things like that. Sputnik Monroe, who a legendary wrestler who is largely responsible for integrating the cards in Memphis wrestling, would go to the Black Quarter in Memphis and get arrested for hanging out with black people. White man, and
yes, I read his Wikipedia article after reading one of your articles.
Yeah, so here's the thing. The man was getting arrested in real life, getting fined real money that the promoter would pay, by the way, because Sputnik was getting in the was getting in the headlines in the newspaper,
Yep.
So he's getting free publicity, quote unquote. So promoters paying his fine to do it, but he's getting arrested for real, and he is they're having to pay real money to keep him out of jail.
Yep.
So,
but that was back when promoters were starting to realize that black money and white money both spent the same way.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Black money, white money, it's all green.
Yes. That was brilliant. Even if he wasn't trying to put across a social viewpoint, what he was doing for business was still brilliant.
Absolutely. And that's what it was. I don't know. He might have had like a social viewpoint.
Yeah.
But he was thinking of his bank account. He was thinking, how do I get more people into the shows?
Yeah.
Well, this is one of the ways to do that. Another thing, like what you were talking about guys who would vacation together. And here's the thing: Eddie Graham, legendary promoter in Tampa, and people wanted to come to Florida. People wanted to work Tampa because the payoffs were good, and because you were at the beach. You were you were basically in heaven if you were working down there. Well, I can't call who they were at the moment. I can't remember who they were, but there were a couple of his headliners who were seen by fans. They were feuding, but they were seen by fans on the beach together, hanging out, drinking some beers, grilling some steaks, doing something. And he called, and Eddie Graham called him and said, "You're done. You're fired." I believe one of them was his booker, one of them was a main event guy, and they were in a promotion or in a marriage together. And Graham's like, "You're done. You're fired." And that's the thing. Eddie Graham was committed to kayfabe. He wanted his wrestlers to act like it's real. And now, was Dusty Rhodes playing a character, or was Dusty Rhodes the American Dream?
I don't know the answer to that because
is Ric Flair playing a character? Is Ric Flair playing a character?
Not anymore. If he ever was, he lost sight of that.
Here's the thing. That's part of Ric's problem in the real world these days is that he never separated Ric Flair from Richard Fliehr. Yeah. So
he'll cut a promo. He'll cut a promo on you if you even approach him outside the ring.
Right. The thing is, I would rather have that era of, let me see, guys who weren't, quote unquote, working on a character. I hate that term when it comes to wrestling. I know it's what's used now, but you watch Dusty Rhodes and you see a guy who believes he is the American Dream. It's not the character he played for 2 hours on television and then went about his business. Professional wrestling, when it's done right, is the most committed form, in my opinion, of method acting.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
You know, think about that. So, anyway,
coming out of
I miss those days.
believability was the thing. It was to me believability,
Yeah.
and when you never saw these guys as being anything else. That's what you believed in. You were willing to spend your money on tickets, or you're willing to buy their T-shirts. Besides, me, I'm like, this will be a $5 sale on the WWE store. I'm going to stock up on all the 5X T-shirts I can get because they're $5. Not because I really like the guy. Hell, I bought a Shane McMahon T-shirt because it was $5, and it's wrestling. But when a guy makes you believe in something, that you'll seek it out, where you'll see him on. Remember when they would be on the cover of the old After mags, and you'd see your superhero bloodied, and you'd have to pick up the magazine to know what was going on.
Absolutely.
And to find out what was wrestling, and they took a picture that captivated you, and it's something about it is gone, and that's why I like Chris Jericho these days just about more than anybody else, because when he's a heel inside and outside the ring. He acts like a heel. He's a performer. I mean, there's a reason you don't watch soap operas. There's a reason you don't watch certain forms of television. Because you watch wrestling, because you get it there. You get it. It's not reality TV. It's a performance.
Right. Another guy who's really good at that these days is Kevin Owens.
Yes. Oh, his face is amazing.
Yeah, he's working as a heel all the time. And another guy who I think is actually really good at it, honestly, is Rusev. Somebody tweeted at him a couple of weeks ago, "Man, you're really living the gimmick." And he tweeted back and said, "What's a gimmick?"
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I like that. I can get behind that, So real quick, I'm going to go through this. Do you remember the U.S. Express?
Yes, I got Mike Rotunda's autograph in Birmingham as a child when they were big.
Nice. Mike Rotunda, Barry Windham, they would go on to do other things, but they were a very, very good babyface tag team.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of my all-time favorites, just because I had his autograph. I mean, I got to approach Deal and talk to, as a kid with a program, that he was a WWE star. That I could get, that they had him, and we weren't like at a table. He was standing in one of the entrances to the ring area at the BJCC in Birmingham, and I walked up to the two of them standing there and asked for an autograph and handed him my program with a pen, and he signed it. And still something I remember. That's one of the wrestling memories that are locked in for life. Absolutely. It's one of the things that makes you a fan. Yeah, exactly. And but they were great. They held the belts. They were great. They were. I didn't even understand who those guys were at the time. I didn't know who they were. And apparently they've produced some quite fine wrestlers out of that bloodline between the two of them. Absolutely. Yeah, those guys are going to be one of the underrated tag teams of all time. I agree. So I'm going to give you a number 19 on it. And really, when I made up this list, I was, and everybody has their own criteria. But number 19 for me is an iconic tag team, the Hart Foundation. Yes. I have them. You see, I have them low here. How about that? Yeah. I feel like if they had, and I mean, it's Brett's launching pad to stardom, and I think that they worked so well together because of the differences. Neidhart, the big blocky guy, and Brett, the smaller guy who was going to sell his ass off. Not to the point of a Ricky Morton, because nobody's going to out Ricky Morton, but still just a great, forgive the wordplay here, a great foundation for Brett to jump from to his
singles career.
Agreed.
And I'm going to give you another blast from the past real quick. Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez in the actually not even the WWF at that point. At that point, it was Capital Wrestling or Capital Sports.
Wow.
Guys working for Toots Mondt. And Rocca would go on to be the great draw of the 50s, 60s, Huge string of sellouts for Madison Square Garden. Never won the world title as a single.
Uh-huh.
But underrated there. Rocca was such a Superman. Miguel Perez had to basically go in and take the beating.
Just because he was
so yeah. So Rocca would come in and he would do his shit and they would win. But they main evented Madison Square Garden for several years. And I say main evented. Main, semi-main, they were on top basically, as much as anybody not named Bruno Sammartino could be.
Yeah.
And the other thing there that I want to point out is that you had Perez, who appealed to the Latino, Hispanic crowd, and then you had Rocca, who also had that appeal because he was, from Brazil or someone, but he also identified as Italian.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a huge draw there for your ethnic population. So
that's
good stuff.
Up in the Northeast, that was a solid thing to have because it's,
absolutely.
Growing up in Alabama, I don't know what part. I know you grew up in Southern Alabama, but where I was up in Southern Alabama, it was probably the least ethnically diverse place on the face of this earth because most of the people had just been there so long that nobody held on to their tradition. So everybody, it wasn't understandable to have ties to the community outside of just everybody being a bunch of rednecks. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I will tell you this: in South Alabama, and and the stereotype is rednecks. Oh, did I lose you guys?
No, I'm still here. Sorry. No.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the stereotype is rednecks, but a big star in Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling and in regional wrestling in Louisiana and kind of what Leroy McGuirk's old Tri-States Wrestling was a guy named Salento Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
So not only Hispanic, but have you guys ever heard of this guy?
No, I have not.
Salento Rodriguez was this is a shoot. He was a deaf-mute wrestler.
Huh.
And he was a draw across racial lines because he had that ability to elicit sympathy and somewhat empathy from the audience because they see him. All right, so he's Hispanic guy, but he is struggling with being deaf mute. Can't cut a promo.
Yeah.
But he goes out there and he wins people over through his ring work.
Yeah.
And through that kind of triumph over his personal disability.
Kind of like a sports entertainment Helen Keller.
Kind of like that, yeah. Although he could see, thank goodness. But, still, I hope we're not going to devolve into Helen Keller jokes here. No. Because I have...
We'll be here all day.
Right, I have about 50 of my own. Anyway, other teams that are kind of lower on the list.
Yeah.
Can-Am Connection, Strike Force, Demolition, which was a great closing act for Bill Eadie, the masked superstar.
Yeah.
Who had also been, and a lot of people don't know this, he was one half of the El Mongol tag team before he ever became the masked superstar.
What was that tag team?
The El Mongols.
El Mongols.
El Mongols. So, and they were big in the 1960s. 60s, early 70s. So from there, Jim, I will say this. Let's see. I got the Midnight Rockers.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Showing my age, it's not just the Rockers here; it's the Midnight Rockers.
Everybody was Midnight or some form of Express at the time.
They were. I mean, somebody's got a good gimmick. Everybody else wants to jump on the train. It's like every independent wrestler when Stone Cold Steve Austin started showing up in jean shorts and a black T-shirt and black boots. Hey, that's what we're gonna go to the ring in.
Mm-hmm.
So, the best thing WWE ever did for them as a tag team, though, was to drop Midnight out of their name and just let them be the Rockers.
Yeah.
And here's another blast from the past for you: Dick the Bruiser and Crusher.
Ooh,
classic AWA.
Yes,
classic AWA. And it's still one of the highlights of my life that I got to actually hold one of the tag team belts that those guys held.
Yeah,
like one of the actual belts. It's just cool.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Moving along, and this team is probably more nostalgia for me than anything because they didn't really stay together that long. But Fargo's Fabulous Ones.
Yeah.
Stan Lane and Steve Keirn. Nobody likes Steve Keirn.
Actually, growing up in Florida, I was a big Steve Keirn guy.
Oh, I meant like in the locker room. He was kind of a tool.
Yeah, that's a totally different story.
But yeah, Keirn was a good worker.
Uh-huh.
There was a rumor that before Bob Backlund was tasked to be the young babyface for the WWF at the time, and the young babyface champion, that Keirn was given a look. That Keirn and Bob Roop, oddly enough, were both given a look too. Roop says he is not aware of that, if it is true. So, but that's the rumor.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous Ones were great. They were, that first team to have the rock and roll music videos, kind of, the vignettes.
Yeah, I've heard
and they were,
and that whole program we're working on with those videos.
Yeah, they were a very good team. And this is where Stan Lane cut his teeth as a tag team wrestler. Prior to that, he was in Southeastern as the U.S. Junior Heavyweight Champion. He had knocked around as a single for a little while. So, again, he cut his teeth as one of the Fabulous Ones in tag team wrestling, and worked out pretty well for him. Another, this one's near and dear to my heart, just as a heel tag team, a chicken shit heel tag team. I can say chicken shit on here, can I?
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's fine.
Okay, all right. So
it's a wrestling
term. Right, chicken shit heel. Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden.
Yes. Robert
Fuller, known better to most people probably as Colonel Rob Parker and Tennessee Lee. Jimmy Golden, better known as Bunkhouse Buck, and then appeared as Jack Swagger's father on some WWE program. I'm gonna say it was Raw, but it might have been SmackDown.
There was a long time where those programs blended together,
right?
It was
so
differentiate.
Now here's my top 10. We'll try to go through these fairly quickly because, I know you guys don't want to keep me because I have so many important things to do. But British Bulldogs,
yes,
would be ranked higher because they were phenomenal, but they had a year or two maybe tops in the U.S.
Yeah.
But everything they did, it redefined what tag teams could do. They were phenomenal as a babyface tag team. They were so athletic, so quick.
Mm-hmm. They were
wild.
Just all over the WWE when they were there. They were amazing.
Yeah. Hey Bobby, if you don't mind, I'm going to play along with you here.
Okay.
And I'll tell you I'll tell you why real quick. You remember? I think I've told you in the past. We did a show back in our archives where we did the top 10 tag teams of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I found my list in my notebook.
Sweet.
I've got it pulled over to the side. I'm not going to talk every one with you, but some of them, like I said,
Okay.
I may throw in there like, hey, and like the reason I brought that up, I agree. I had Bulldogs at 9. So we were pretty much neck and neck on the same. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know I may throw in because I actually got my list to my right. So
nice. For me, number 9, and these guys are kind of like these are ranked. Number 9 for me, the Steiner brothers.
Definitely. They were an amazing team. Personalities probably was the main thing that got in the way with them down the road. But they're amazing, and they're still local to us right now.
Right.
Rick owns the Shoney's.
No, that's Scott.
Scott owns the Shoney's. Rick is the real estate agent,
and Rick's the head of the PA or something like that over in his.
Yeah, Rick is a politician doing education in his spare time. I find that really interesting. I would love to see him interviewed about that. I would love to do that interview.
Yeah.
So, hey, Rick, if you're listening.
Hey, maybe we'll reach out to him and see if we can put it all together.
Yeah.
Hey, that'd be great.
Scott's Shoney's and see what we can find out.
my wife is not a Shoney's fan, but I grew up on Shoney's and I still like it. I say that as a fat guy. So
I like the first 30 minutes of the experience. After leaving the Shoney's and getting on down the road, a lot of times I don't like it as much.
Right. So the Wild Samoans.
Oh, that's a vicious tag team right there.
Brutal, vicious. One of the first tag teams I can remember seeing. And I saw them in person. Afa and Siko were just terrifying. And they were terrifying from California to the southeast, where they eventually settled, at least for a while, in Pensacola.
Mm-hmm.
They would fly out of Pensacola and do shots for WWF at the time, winning their tag titles up there.
Oh yeah, just brutal.
Just vicious looking guys. And apparently tough in real life too.
Back when wrestlers would scare you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And just wait until you hear my number 3 when we're talking about guys who will scare you.
Okay.
All right.
Well, not to throw in a side note, the Samoans kind of they produce some good. That gene pool's not too shabby either when it comes to producing wrestlers down the road. So
absolutely. So we also have the Hollywood Blondes, the Stone Cold Steve Austin before he was Stone Cold,
yes,
and Brian Pillman.
Yep.
So,
yep. That's a solid one, man. That's beautiful.
I have 2 quick stories about them that, to me, show their playful and hilarious side. Okay. So one of the things that they tried to do, Ric Flair, famous for never blowing up in the ring, all right, never needing to get his wind. And there was a tag team match between the Hollywood Blondes, Ric Flair, and Arn Anderson that appeared in WCW, where they, for a shoot, would not let Rick tag out. They were keeping him in the ring, trying to blow him up.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it during the match. Afterward, he was brutally tired, but they would not let Ric Flair tag.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to wear him out. And that's to me that's a hilarious visual. I know, especially at the time, I had to have seen the match and not knew what was going on. But they were just trying to brutally stop Flair, So I think that's a great story. The other thing, Brian Pillman was a great ribber in a lot of ways in the ring. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to Rip Rogers talk about this. One of the easiest ways to rib a new guy is to chop them as hard as you can and tell them not to sell it. And so there was a point, Steve Austin talks about this on his podcast. There's a point where he says, Pillman pushes Van Hammer, who was brand new to the company. Great look, very athletic, a guy who could have probably gone places had things shaken out differently. But Pillman chops him and says, don't sell it. and then proceeds to like follow him around the ring, chopping him. Don't sell it. Chop. Don't sell it. Bam. Don't sell it. And it's a rib to do to somebody to see how long until they catch on that you're just doing it to fuck with them, So anyway, and apparently Van Hammer never caught on during the match that he was being messed with.
Pillman and Stone Cold probably did one of the most controversial angles of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Brian Pillman had the gun and Stone Cold was in his house. Probably one of the things that right up there, I would say, in the top 5 most disturbing, most controversial bits. But they were friends. These guys had been working together forever prior to coming to WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And both guys were just that over the top with the characters.
Yeah. And the side note real quick to that story is, you remember that they, at one point, they were tossed together as a team. Austin, I've heard him talk about the same thing on his podcast, where he said he thought he was getting a U.S. title push. Harley was going to be with him, and he shows up, and they're like, "Oh, Brian comes up to him and says, 'Oh, they're putting us in a tag team,' and he's like, 'What?' And they're like, 'Yeah, they're putting us in a tag,' and they ran with that idea. Most of the stuff, their idea, and I was like, to be that great of a team, and it literally was, well, we don't have anything for you. Let's just throw you into a team."
The other funny thing about that, why they disbanded them? They were getting over, and they weren't supposed to be.
Right.
And I mean, that's WCW for you. Here's the thing: Stone Cold Steve Austin was not supposed to take off in the then WWF. He was supposed to be, getting a mild push. He was king of the ring and whatnot. But when people started responding to him, WWF actually took the ball and ran with it with him. Plans don't work out in the wrestling business. Take the saddle off one horse, put it on another.
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense to me when you have guys who you want to push, like Roman Reigns. Who is a fine wrestler. I actually think he is a very, very good wrestler. His matches speak for themselves. They're a little formulaic. They're a little repetitive. But he's having great matches with a variety of people. But nobody wants to see him. And nobody certainly wants to see him as the baby face of the company.
Yeah.
So find someone else.
I was about to ask you, why is that a lesson? How is that a lesson that they forgot back in the from back in the day? If the fans are jumping behind somebody, push them. If the fans are turning on it, turn them.
Yeah.
Nobody expected Road Dogg and Billy Gunn to get over the way they did either.
Yeah.
But they got over to the point that Hunter, Triple H, who did not like those guys, put them into DX so that they could get some of the rub.
Yeah, and those two had been repackaged so many different times as tag with other people, and they finally found the formula that worked, and it was just pure magic.
It was good stuff, wasn't it?
Yep.
And neither one, like Brian, the Road Dogg, was never going to be a great wrestler. He's a really good entertainer and a great bump taker. You look at the way he bumps and sells for people. Really, really good. But his finisher was a pump handle slam. This is not, you know what I mean? Brian's not going to win the Luthez Mat Wrestler of the Year award.
Oh man, 1,000 holds.
But he was man of like 10 holds.
Yeah.
So, and that's not a shot at him. That is not a shot at him. That wasn't his wheelhouse. That wasn't what he had to do to get over.
Yeah. Well, his creativity is paying off because you can see him now because he's writing SmackDown, which is typically better of the two programs.
Absolutely. Let's see. Who else do I have here? One of my favorite and most underrated teams, and I'm only going to mention them because I'm going to go and talk about them a couple of times up here. The Fantastics. Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton.
Yes.
All right. For my money, and I will say this and then move on real quick because I know that we got some stuff to cover. But for my money, a better team than the Rock and Roll Express.
But weren't they just always on the heels of the Rock and Roll Express?
That's it.
Everywhere except Texas. In Texas, Fantastics got there first and were over like crazy. The Rock and Rolls came into Texas, and it was like, oh, well, yeah, you guys are okay, but we've seen your shtick already. It was, it was Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton, and they were really good. And they had a better look. Tommy Rogers, 5'5" on a good day. I'm 5'7". I've stood next to Tommy Rogers, and I'm like, huh, how about that? But Tommy Rogers, Bobby Fulton, Tommy who was, built in great shape and could work his ass off. And Bobby Fulton, who was apparently went from a chubby teenager who wanted to be in the wrestling business, worked out enough to where his body didn't look bad either. And a good wrestler and the lightest guy who apparently unintentionally sandbagged everybody that he wrestled. He was very hard to lift, according to Jim Cornette. He's like, you can't pick this guy up, the body slam. I can't do a Jim Cornette impression. I could, but it'd just be bad.
That's one of the harder impersonations to do because even when Pritchard does it, he can only do Cornette when Cornette's like super angry and yelling.
So, number 5 for me is the Road Warriors and Legion of Doom. Whatever name you know them from. These are guys who were on top in the NWA, in the AWA, and in the WWF/E. Yep. You cannot deny their greatness.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 for me would be the Freebirds.
Before we interject, Bobby, how old are you again?
I am 46.
Okay, I'm 43. Yeah. And the reason why I ask is just funny. My 5 was the Road Warriors as well. Exactly the same spot.
That's funny. Nice. That's great.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in.
No, that's great. Here's the thing. If you saw them on TBS and you heard the music Iron Man playing, you knew somebody was getting an ass kicking. And it didn't take long. They might not even shut the music down by that time. You know what I mean? Somebody was taking an ass whipping. Yep. Period. You could not look away from the Road Warriors on TV. Yeah. You couldn't. You also couldn't ask them to work a long match. At least not at that point. But that was it's kind of like the Goldberg thing. You had to watch. You had to be there because it wasn't going to take long, and it was going to be physically impressive.
It was very formulaic. It was music hits, Warriors come out, destroy somebody, walk to podium, all in the ring, cuts promo, walk away. Kind of like that was.
Absolutely, yeah. But it worked, and it worked everywhere they did it. Mm-hmm. All right, so number 4 for me is the Freebirds, the fabulous Freebirds. And I will only accept the Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts. I will only accept that version of the Freebirds because they were tremendous. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we're 2 in a row. We're identical. Sorry, my 4's Freebirds.
Oh no, that's great. That's nice. This is weird. We are different people, I swear.
Yeah.
So, number 3 for me, the Sheep Herders. The Sheep are not the, and here's the thing. I'd make a definite line of demarcation between the Sheep Herders and the Bushwhackers.
Yes.
Okay? The Sheep Herders, people who have only seen Luke Williams and Butch Miller as the Bushwhackers don't know. They simply do not know. They don't know what kind of terror the Sheep Herders inflicted into fans. They've never seen the barbed wire match, the barbed wire cage match between the Fantastics and the Sheep Herders in Mid-South. This is your two young, really good-looking babyface fantastics versus the sheep herders with, four guys juicing with, the match is just brutal. And not only is it brutal, it's a great match. But the sheep herders did some things as a tag team when they went into Southeastern in 1981, I think. They won the vacant Southeastern Tag Team Championships. Come out on TV, Lord Jonathan Boyd, holding one of the tag team titles, drops it on the desk, and he says, "We are the sheep herders. These are our credentials. We're here to stay." And for the next nearly year, in a territory system, the sheep herders held the tag team title without dropping it for more than a couple of days at a time, feuding with Joe LeDuc and Robert Fuller had just broken up, which is why the tag team titles were vacant. Basically feuded with so many people until finally, a year later, they get run out of town for good by Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden working as a babyface tag team. But the level of mayhem that the sheep herders and Joe LeDuc put people through in the what they called the Commonwealth Connection was just amazing. So the sheep herders did phenomenal work, drew tons of money long before the Bushwhackers were a thing for WWE.
How did McMahon see that and then turn them into a comedy bit?
Mm-hmm.
I just that never made any sense to me.
Well, I mean, they probably drew more money and had bigger paychecks as the comedy act.
That's the way I always knew them as the Bushwhackers.
Mm-hmm.
Until I found out they were the sheep herders.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't make sense once I figured that out.
Right.
It was a completely different dynamic.
Right. And one of the reasons Luke Williams talks about this, one of the reasons they did it was because it was easier. Like physically, even though the travel was tougher, the matches were so much easier on their body. And this is after years and years and years of working territories. You know, where they were going out and bleeding every night and legitimately, by the time they got to WWE, they were physically breaking down.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons they were over, why they were put in a humorous tag team situation. So, and you ask him, he preferred, if you ask Luke, he apparently preferred that because it was so much easier on his body and he's still making good money.
Yeah. Perfectly logical thing.
I would take that route any day. Trust me. If I was told, because I'm the reverse. I grew up in that Mid-South, that, Florida, that whole territory area. And I remember them as the bloody, brutal sheep herders. And when I finally saw them on WWF at the time, I was like, really? How am I supposed to buy this? I was like,
right.
But that was the time.
Yeah.
So like I can't blame them in the least for taking the easier paydays.
Mm-hmm. So I have a tie for number 2. I have the Rock and Roll Express, who, the recent WWE Hall of Famers, and Terry Gordy and Steve Williams.
Oh, with the Extreme Violence Connection, or was that
whatever they were called in Japan? But they were
Terry. It was just a hard name.
Just guys who were going out and trying to kill people. That's. Those guys were badass. They were badass in WCW. They were badass in Japan. You cannot look at those guys and go, that's not a great tag team. To me, they were so over, especially in Japan. They were probably the only team in Japan, the team of Americans, that rivaled Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty violent team right there. Those, but I mean, as far as Williams and Gordy, those are two guys that if Cornette were to describe a wrestler as what a wrestler should be, that's what they'd look like. They're two big guys legitimately look like they could beat your ass.
Mm-hmm.
And there are those guys. And
Mm-hmm.
it went over because you believed it. You were
Mm-hmm.
guys, you would see these guys and back down regardless because they're that
Mm-hmm.
big and they carry themselves like badasses.
There's not a real way to describe how big Terry Gordy actually was.
No.
You know, he was. So I ran into him at an indie show in Gadsden, Alabama.
Wow.
Back. This is after he had overdosed or whatever it was, and gone into a coma, and he had woken up, and he was not the same person mentally. You know.
Yeah, I'd heard stories.
Super nice guy still, but enormous, to the point where the promotion, the indie promotion, had a 18-foot ring out in the middle of this high school gym.
Mm-hmm.
And Gordy's the biggest guy on the card, and it's, you know, everybody else is there about my size. Gordy's running the ropes, and the ring is nearly lifting. Like, you can see that the ring is moving when he's hitting the ropes. He's hitting the ropes as hard as he can, and the ring posts are coming off the floor.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that is, I was just like, holy shit. So, not only big, powerful, I guarantee you I would not have wanted to be in the way of that guy when he was coming at me. So.
Oh, I would agree with you 100% on that.
And so, you know, in Rock and Roll Express, we could talk all day about how great they were, but I want to get to my number one because I love those guys. They're amazing. The Midnight Express, from the Midnight Express Incorporated in 1981 in Southeastern to Bill Watts Mid-South Wrestling, which is where they really took off.
Yep.
And I love what Jim Cornette says about Bill Watts, and you can understand why Cornette still has loyalty to Bill Watts when he talks about how Watts was essentially making them. He made their careers because during and I wrote a little bit about this, that during a segment, the Midnights got to jump Watts, do something that nobody else ever did, jumped him, left him laying in a pool of his own blood, causing him to come out of retirement for the last Stampede angle and match with it was Junkyard Dog under a mask wrestling as Stagger Lee, teaming with Bill Watts.
When Bill Watts goes to Junkyard Dog to ask him, and he says, "No, I can't help you. I can't come back, but I know a guy who can." And then they go to meet Stagger Lee, and that is so awesome to watch that angle because it is the essence of what wrestling was at the time. It's that suspension of disbelief, even though the guy he just talked to is actually a guy he's going to meet later. They don't even, and everybody knows because there's no way you can't tell. Junkyard Dog. Yeah, that was wonderful. And then the Midnights, and oh God, think about all that talent in the ring at one time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And here's the funny thing, and I love this. Watts was going to leave the Midnights. He was going to let them go after that program was over. He was going to they were going to finish up their dates with Mid-South. If that had happened, there would have never been the rivalry between the Midnights and the Rock and Roll Express. So finally, Bill Dundee, who was the booker at the time, told Watts, "You can't let these guys go. They've got, you know, we've got something else with them that they can do. They can do this program with rock and roll."
Yeah,
and it was electric.
Just print money with that,
right? And the Midnight Express had been in the territory for, at the time, which was a fairly long time. They took the Mid-South Tag Team titles off of Mr. Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA. And Jim Cornette tells a great story about Mr. Wrestling 2, he loved working with Bobby Eaton, who he would hit Bobby with his finish, which was a knee lift, right? And Bobby would go over the top rope from it. You know, like without touching the ropes. Bobby would, you know, or another time he would backflip off of it. You know, whatever. Bobby would always sell it really well, and then suddenly, too, realizes, I'm hitting these guys with my finish. I'm hitting Bobby Eaton with my finish 3 times in a match just because he enjoyed watching how he would sell it. And then we're not, and he's like, well, we're not even winning. We're not going over. I'm wasting my finish. And then Jim Cornette says, you couldn't get him to throw a knee lift the rest of the time they were working together. So, because too, you know, he was very serious about protecting his gimmick and protecting his finish.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, they were back then.
Yeah. So, to me, the Dennis Condrey, Bobby Eaton version of the Express is the best version, I think. I'm changing my mind here. I always want to say, being a purist, that the first incarnation with Randy Rose, Dennis Condrey, and Norvell Austin is the best, and it's still great. It really is. But Condrey and Eaton were something special. So those are my, you know, and everybody knows, or at least everyone should know, about the Midnights versus Midnights feud in the NWA.
Yeah, love that feud. I've went back and watched through all that. That is amazing. You know why that program ended? What's that?
That it was the same thing as the Hollywood Blondes. They were getting over.
Oh yes.
They were getting over more than the Road Warriors, who were there at the time and who were, you know.
But didn't Condrey disappear again?
Condrey did disappear again, and this was because they were not being pushed the way he felt they should be pushed. Not getting enough money. I mean, when you talk to these old school pro wrestlers, it legitimately is a business for them.
Yeah.
So, and they're absolutely right too. If somebody was going to talk to you about your work,
yeah,
and you were like, "Well, I had to go into the office, but I only drew like $300 this week when I was supposed to be making $700 this week." You know, I mean,
oh yeah, I read your territories piece, and that, I mean, just thinking about the amount of corruption and the outlaw territory stuff thing that was going on at that time, that was really, really fascinating for me.
But now Condrey was always kind of as I understand it, he was kind of a fuck you guy, you know? Like, I'm going to be professional, and I expect you to be professional. If you're not, fuck you. That was
so amazing. He got tied up with Cornette with that attitude.
But here's the thing: Jim would do shit that was Jim would do stuff that was funny and entertaining, but he was also incredibly professional.
Yeah.
From everything I understand.
The most important thing to Cornette is professionalism.
It seems like it. He tells a story about he beat the shit out of Buzz Sawyer one night with the tennis racket. So there are a couple of different ways he could hit somebody with a tennis racket. The working way was he hit you with the flat of the racket.
Yeah.
You know, it'd just make a nice loud pop. And the way he would hit marks with the racket is he would hit him with the edge of the racket. Like, you know, just bring it down as hard as he could. Buzz Sawyer, during a match, hit him about as hard as he could and did something basically to fuck Jim over. So Jim hit him with the racket, but not in the working way. Bashed him in the head with the racket as hard as he could. And Sawyer afterward comes to where the Midnight Express is dressing.
They were dressing in a trailer, weren't they?
Yeah, they were dressing in a trailer. And so he stomps up the stairs to this trailer, goes in, and Condrey has his hand in his dressing bag, in his gym bag, because he's got his hand on his gun. because Buzz Sawyer was a tough son of a bitch, and if he's going to really go crazy there. So anyway, he asked Cornette, where are you fucking hitting me like the fucking marks? And Cornette's like, because you're shooting on me, because you're taking liberties with me,
Yep.
So, and the best part of that story is that Buzz apparently rants and raves for a few minutes and then tries to walk out of the trailer and falls down the steps and into the mud. Like, Buzz got beat up by Jim Cornette and then fell down the steps in the trailer when he was trying to say something about it.
That's a perfect example of that age, because that's when those guys actually carried guns from territory and show to show.
Wouldn't you, if your job was to piss people off?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, that's going to wrap up part 1 of our interview with Bobby Mathews. Part 2 will drop later this weekend. When then we're going to break down some more current topics as far as getting heat, The Miz, a lot of Seth Rollins, a lot of topics we are going to touch on. So definitely keep an eye out for that episode coming this weekend. But for now, guys, hey, you always know how to find us. We always say, hey, we encourage feedback. You can find us you can email us at tappedoutwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com, tappedoutwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com. You can reach us at Twitter at tappedoutpod. That is at tappedoutpod. Of course, we are at Facebook at Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network, Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Of course, man, the easiest way to find us, dude, is if you go to our website, it's just tappedoutwrestlingpodcast.com. Everything is there. All the links to the stuff you need. The media player with all of the episodes is right down the middle of the page. You can even download directly from the website if you want to do that. If you have noticed, yes, we went back to the old player. A lot of people said they liked being able to just scroll straight down through all and then download the episodes right from the computer and listen there. So we went back to that. We got the feedback, so we went with it. You can also find our links to iTunes, Google Play, and stuff there to the left. And, of course, last but not least, the Fight app link is there. You got to get that Fight app, man. With all the stuff going down, as you know, the Fight app is the place to be. You got great wrestling, Rockstar Pro Wrestling, but my favorite currently at the moment, Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling. You got Throwback Championship Wrestling, a lot of other promotions that are on there. ICW, of course, man, they carry the Ring of Honor pay-per-views like World of Worlds from this last weekend. They carry the Impact pay-per-views like One Night Only this past week. So between pay-per-views and free content, man, you got to get that Fight app. Use our link. It's on our website. It's also on our Twitter feeds and Facebook from time to time. Use that link to download the app since we're referring you there. It just kind of gives us credit for referring you over. And then, of course, man, the Amazon link's there as well. We've said it a million times, man. Amazon link, use our link, replace your old Amazon.com link. Basically, we're not asking you to buy anything, spend any more money. Everything's normal. All we're asking is that you, hey, use that link. That'll kick a little commission our way for a little referral fee, basically. So that's all we ask. So again, guys, hey, we'll see you tonight. We'll be here for the live Raw recap, and then of course Tuesday as well. Wednesday we have the it's going on and on and on. Thursday's the podcast where we drop the Wrestling Dorks, their show, which next week we will debut the DDT archives, and the Dorks will move to Friday. This week, this is the second part of this interview. Will probably be Friday or Saturday, depending on the editing process. But hopefully you'll see that Friday or Saturday. We look forward to it, guys, and we'll see you then.